Hi everyone, John here from All Miniatures Great and Small, and today we're going to be taking a look at and chatting about the new West German intelligence briefing for Team Yankee World War III miniatures game. So I got a review PDF of this book, and I was very excited to take a look at it. My interest in Team Yankee has been rekindled in the last few months. We had a battle report, or a couple battle reports on the channel, and I've been working on my Americans and adding to my my limited Soviet collection. And the West Germans represent one of those big forces that you can have in the game. One of the primary combatants. You have the Americans, the Russians, obviously, the British, and the West Germans. And then all of the other nations are kind of smaller nations. They so far have been maybe combined into single books or things like that. So the West Germans represent a pretty big release. So this keeps in pace with the American book, the British book, the Soviet book. All right, so this is not the first time the West Germans have been released for Team Yankee. While this isn't a reprint, this is kind of a restructuring of how they're releasing it and keeping it in line with those previous releases that I mentioned. As a result, I'm not just going to talk about the new units that are in the book, but I'm also going to talk about everything that's in here, realizing that if you're listening to this, you may be an old hand and have played the West Germans before, or maybe you're brand new to it. I'm going to make this overview not super detailed, because we do plan on eventually doing unit overviews for a lot of the things in this book, and we just want to cover the whole book in a reasonable amount of time. Alright, so the West Germans, obviously at the end of World War II, Germany was split in half. The Soviets have East Germany on their side, while the West has West Germany. The West Germans represent probably one of, if not the most elite forces you can possibly take in Team Yankee, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we get in. So I think the first thing we're going to talk about is the different types of companies you can take in the book, what's offered here. We have several of them. We have a Leopard 2A5 Panzer company, and the new 2A5 Leopard is like the best of the best. A Leopard 2 Panzer Company, Leopard 1 Panzer Company, a Marder 2 Panzer Grenadier Company, and again, I think the Marder 2 is another new unit for this release. Marder 1 Grenadier, Panzer Grenadier, M113 Panzer Grenadier. Those are very similar, except that they're just swapping out for the most part, they're just swapping out the transport, the Marder 2, the Marder 1. Then we have a Panzeraufklarungs company. We have, I think, a couple of versions of that. Then we have Jaeger, Jaeger Brigade, and I apologize for my butchering of the pronunciation. You have a Heimat's Schutz Brigade, and then you have all the West German support. So it's it's got a lot of formations in it. A lot of the formations correspond to stuff you might see more so in the American book than the Soviet book, but still pretty cool. I will say the rules aren't found till about page 20 of the rule book, and what we get in a very nice rule book is more Team Yankee history. We get some actual history of West German forces, and then it kind of rolls into the Team Yankee narrative. So you have that to look forward to, and that's always kind of a fun, a fun read. Then we start getting into the formations and the rules. So the West Germans, again, we talked about the different kinds of companies. I think all told there was 11 different kinds of companies, maybe 12. And then all of them have access to the same type of support. We're going to go and talk about probably the most exciting unit, at least for me, and that is coming out of the Panzer Brigades and the Leopard 2A5 Panzer Company. Alright, so this is a monster tank. It is one of the best tanks in the game, and it is pointed to match that. it is really expensive. And I think you'll find that analog in the Allies. You have the M1A1 Abrams, you have the T-80 looking at the Soviets, and this is quite along those same lines. It is a monster of a tank. A single tank cost somewhere around, well, it's cheaper than a M1A1 HC Abrams. That's the most expensive American Abrams by 1 or 2 points, but it's still really, really expensive. You can't get more than 5 in a 100-point list, and that's taking like almost nothing else. Why is it so expensive? Well, I think on the whole, West Germans have really good ratings. Now, here's where it's kind of crazy. It has front armor 22. That's, I think, the best front armor in the game so far, at least on main battle tanks. Side 13, top 2. It does have Chobham armor and thermal imaging as well. Weapon-wise, it still has that 120 millimeter gun that everyone is so used to. It is, 40-inch range, rate of fire 2, anti-tank 22, 2+ firepower. So it's a very similar gun. So it's better armored than the Abrams, but its gun isn't quite as good as the Abrams. It's one better armor, I believe, but one less anti-tank on the main gun. But otherwise, it's a beast. You're never probably going to have more than a couple of these in your army, but even a couple of these are going to command attention. There's nothing in the game that can really hurt them from the front, save a couple of super high anti-tank, like aircraft-fired missiles at this point. Helicopter, Hellfire might be able to do it from Apache, but for the most part, these guys are really, really solid. All right, so the Leopard 2A5 company, I don't think anyone's going to really take it as their primary company, although it could be. Basically, you have an HQ of 1 or 2, and then you have to take at least one platoon, of which the minimum is 2, and you can bump it all the way up to 4, but wow, that's a lot of points. And then the second required formation unit is either another Leopard or a Leopard 2, 2A5, or Marders, or Marder 2s. Then you've got some inbuilt recon, some Gepard flak batteries, some integral artillery, and Jagdpanzer Jaguar 1. So the support actually is really nice for this company because you have a little bit of everything. You've got some artillery in there, some AA, some recon, and some anti-tank. Overall, it's an interesting looking company. But are you going to use it? I think there's another one that at least I'm more attracted to initially, and we'll get to that one a little bit. All right, next up we have let me get to it here, the Leopard 2 Panzer Grenadier Company, which is basically the previous awesome tank in the game, the regular kind of vanilla Leopard 2. The units in here are pretty much the same. You've got artillery, you've got Gepard AA, you've got a couple of options for recon, so it's pretty good. It's just, do you want your line platoons to be cheaper Leopards? Now Leopards run, they're pretty close to Abrams, like the M1 and the M1 IP, but they're a little bit more expensive than that. One Leopard is more expensive than one T-80, Shock T-80, in the Soviet side as well. What are you getting for that number of points? You're getting a front armor 18, side 7, top 2, with the same gun that the Leopard 2A5 has. So, and you have the same, the same skill and courage ratings as well. I really like this tank, but again, it's it is a pricey tank. Those Soviet players that are complaining that the shock T-80s are too expensive, this Leopard doesn't even have the armor of a T-80. All right, moving on, we have the Marder 2. The Marder 2 formations. So you have a Marder 2 Panzer Grenadier Company. So the Marder 2 is another one of the new models that are released, and they're kind of exciting because they're really cool looking vehicles. Basically, you get a standard Panzer Grenadier platoon. You can either take them with one Marder. I guess the HQ gives you the choice of one Marder or two, plus infantry. And then you have a couple of Marder 2 Panzer Grenadier platoons that are mandatory. The second mandatory platoon could be swapped out for your variety of Leopards. And that might be a better use of points, because you could take a Leopard 2A5, the more expensive one in here, and still have plenty of points to get other stuff. In addition to the standard recon, Gepards for AA and artillery, Jagdpanzer Zug from a Jaguar 1. It's a pretty cool unit. The platoons themselves, you can either take a 3 Marder or 2 Marder platoon, and then you have the option of taking a Milan missile on those Marders themselves, which gives you a nice AT-21. Alright, scrolling through, we do have Marder 1s, which are kind of the old version of that same formation. The Marder 1 is just not as capable a tank, but your units are a little bit cheaper. And then you can do the same thing, same kind of formation, but this time with M113s for an even cheaper, cheaper infantry stand. Okay, so let's scroll down to the next one here. We have the Leopard 2. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Panzeraufklarungs company. There we go. This reminds me a lot of the armored troop company in the U.S. book with the Bradleys and M1 Abrams. What this does is it gives you a Leopard choice in the HQ, a single Leopard, 2 required Marder 2 SPA troops, and then 1 required either Leopard 2A5 or regular Leopard 2. Then you can take more Marders, more Leopards. You can take an integral Gepard battery, but really that's about it. So the Marder 2 SPA troop, that's the 2 units that gets you Scout and Spearhead. So it's again similar to how the Bradleys have the 2 Bradleys in their Scout unit. The Marder 2 itself, let's talk a little bit about that tank. It's got a front armor 6, which is really nice. Side 4, top 1. It has a 35 millimeter cannon, or you can upgrade it to a 50 millimeter cannon. Either way, they're throwing out some pretty significant AT for armored personnel carrier size vehicles. That 35 millimeter is AT-11, which is really nice. The 50 millimeter is AT-13. Both of those should be plenty to deal with BMP-3s. I consider like the BMP-3, the Bradley, this Marder 2, they're all kind of on the same level. Although this particular one looks like it does not come with a tow option. Okay. All right, moving on, we do have a Panzeraufklarungs company that uses the Leopard 1, and it's the same concept, except you have Leopard 1s and Lux, which are your kind of small 8-wheeled armored cars. Think of like Pumas in World War II, and you can't go too wrong. The Leopard 1 we'll talk about in a little bit. The Lux itself is just a small, it's got a 20 millimeter cannon, so it can still hurt APCs, particularly BMP 1s and 2s. Might struggle firing at a BMP 3 though. Okay. Next up, let's take a look at the. They do have Fallschirmjäger, the Fallschirmjäger company. It is brought to you by Huey's. Each platoon has, the standard kind of German infantry. Most of these are laid out the same way. 5 MG3 and G3 teams with Panzerfaust and 1 Milan missile team. And then you can add helicopters for a couple of points. Now, the neat thing about the Fallschirmjäger, it's something you don't see, I don't think so in Team Yankee quite a bit, is just basic leg infantry without a transport. Now, this shows helicopters and all that stuff, but the helicopters are optional. So if you just wanted to run, some elite infantry minus their transports, you could look at this one for a very inexpensive formation to get on the table. They also have these cute little tanks, these Wessels, or it's German for weasel. They're tiny little tanks, kind of almost look like little World War I tanks. They're so small. They're meant to be airlifted, by helicopter or transport plane, and they have a tow version and a AA version of this tank. So that is something you can do for a thematic kind of, these are my Fallschirmjäger. They're kind of on their own, holding out against great odds. All right. Then we have Gerbungsjäger, and that is pretty similar. The Gerbungsjäger are just leg infantry. They're hit on 4, so they're they're kind of elite, and I think that's German for mountain troops or mountain infantry. And they give you the option of smaller and larger sized platoons, and they can be supported by Leopard 1s. Leopard 1s are pretty cheap tanks. I think Leopard 1s, T-55, T-62s, M60 Pattons all kind of fall in that same category, although I think a Patton is much more capable than a Leopard 1. It's kind of in there. They're like second tier or third tier tanks for the most part. I guess you could say the M60 is a third tier tank now that we have the M1A1, then you have the regular M1, and then you have the M60. Unless you're a Marine player, then it's your top tier tank. All right, but the Leopard 1 is pretty interesting. I mean, it's got paper thin armor, front 9, which isn't much more than the Marder 2, but it's got a 105 millimeter gun. It's slinging around 18-19. So Leopard 1s aren't meant to go toe to toe with top tier main battle tanks. Even things like T-64s. Are going, T-72s even aren't going to have much of a problem with the Leopard 1. But the nice thing is you can take a lot of them. They average about 3 points a tank, and it's a way to get some numbers, particularly if you made a big investment in some Leopard 2s. So you might want some more armor that's a little bit less expensive. Then you have the Jaeger company, which I think is really interesting because this is a hit-on-3 list for the West Germans. And you don't see that very often for the NATO forces. So they're hit-on-3. They still have really good courage and skill ratings, but they're hit-on-3. They have access to M113s as their transport. But really, they are just infantry teams with a Milan missile launcher attached to it. Basically, these are kind of the last line of defense in West Germany. They're the older guys. and they're kind of hanging back. Why there's hit on 3s instead of 4s, I'm not sure, but it's a nice option to have at the table. The other thing that this formation brings as a core unit is a cannon Jaeger panzer Zug, and basically it looks like a Jagdpanther from World War II. That's what I think. I think it looks really cool. I'm kind of sad that it's not that great a vehicle. It's really front armor 6, so it's like a Marder 2. Anti-tank 16. It's only got a 90mm gun. Anti-tank 16. 2+ firepower. So again, it's not really scaring main battle tanks on the field at all. Even things like an M60 Patton would not have to worry around this kind of vehicle. But it's cheap, and if you're playing a thematic kind of last line of defense, they're busting these kind of older vehicles out and bringing them forward for this final battle. So it's interesting. Plus, I think it just looks really cool. So there you have it. All right, so those are the primary companies. The West German support is they've got some good stuff. They have the PA helicopter, which is pretty. It's pretty expensive. It does have the hunter killer rule, so that's nice that it can hide and pop up and get cover that way. But it's hit on 4, has a 5-up save, and it carries the hot missile, which gives you AT-23, which is going to be one of the better anti-tank ratings you're going to see in the West German book at all. And that goes out to 48 inches, which might outrange cannon type AA, but it's not going to outrange missile-based AA for the most part. The helicopter, though, looks cool. I mean, it's no Apache. I think the Apache is the most awesome-looking helicopter in the game right now, but it definitely looks mean. It's got those cool missiles on the side. Then the West Germans do come with a nice selection of artillery. Some of it is NATO artillery that you're going to find in American or British lists, and some of it is unique to them. They have a rocket launcher, a light rocket launcher system, which is just a bunch of 110mm rockets firing in a giant salvo. Anti-tank 3, though, so it's not really going to affect affect armor that much, particularly main battle tanks with a top armor 2. Then we have the Mars, which is basically a MRLS, and it's similar stats. It has a salvo 3+5 firepower, so not quite the same as the rocket battery. The M109, which is the very similar to the American version, which is also an M109 self-propelled gun. It does give you some cool options like bomblets, but basically it's a big anti-tank 4, 2+ firepower. So these guys can actually threaten, even top armor 2 tanks have a chance of failing against these guys. Then there are actually 2 versions of this. There's the M109G and the M109A3G. The main difference is a direct fire, I believe. The AT of the direct fire is better on the A3G model. And different formations some of them can choose, some of them have to take one, some of them have to take the other. But really they're both the M109 variant of some kind. In the AA arena, the West Germans have a couple of interesting options. They have the Leopard, which is their basically a AA cannon-based truck, similar to a Sergeant York or a Schilke. Then you have the Roland, which is basically a short-ranged anti-aircraft missile. And you get a couple shots with that Roland. You can take up to 6 of them, which is really nice. Each one gets 3 shots, 4+ firepower, 56-inch range, so that's outranging pretty much everything in the Soviet arsenal as far as air. So very nice unit there. And then they can take their infantry with handheld launchers, which is really good as well. They can take a lot of stands, I think up to 6 of those stands. The other thing to talk about, that I didn't touch on before, was the Tornado strike aircraft. So you can take up to 4 of these, and that's very similar to every other nation except the Soviets. And it's a hit on 4 aircraft, nothing new there. 5-up save. They're just a couple points each, so they're not that big of an investment. But they are. They do have the submunition dispenser with bombs, and that can drop an anti-tank 7 3+ firepower on top of a unit. Well, lots of units with the salvo template, which is the huge template. The downside of that is it's only 6 inches. You have to be 6 inches away from your target. If there is any AA left on the table that your opponent has, these tornadoes are probably not getting through. Harriers have the same exact problem. But anti-tank, think about that, anti-tank 8, even against top armor 2, like on a T-80, you need to roll, the Soviet would need to roll a 6 on his armor roll to even equal. Otherwise, it's a penetrating hit, and that's a 3+ firepower, which is really, really nice. They also have a cannon, which is nothing special, particularly when you can drop those bomblets at almost the same range. But again, they're cheap, and if you can clear off Soviet AA off the table, these guys could theoretically wreck shop for a minimum amount of points. So that's kind of a highlight of some of the units. Obviously, I didn't go through everything. Talking about some of the newer ones, like the awesome Marder 2 and the the Leopard 2 with the A5 upgrade. Just some awesome stuff that the West Germans bring to the table. The other book, or sorry, not the other book, but the other thing that this book has is scenarios, which all of these books have to some extent. They continue the narrative for for the game, and I always enjoy that. Sometimes although I enjoy them and I read them, sometimes it's like, the problem is with those missions is they do give you an order of battle. It's like a fictional historical battle you're recreating, and as a result, I don't always have all that stuff in my in my collection. It also shows you how the board is set up, and I don't have like Battlefront style woods that do their map, but you can approximate that. The other thing is, even though they they give you preset forces for this battle, they also give you an alternative force limit, like just 100 points or whatever. So you can play by just buying your units and playing the mission, which can be good, and I think it's a totally fine way to play. But there's some good missions in there that continue the story of the West Germans trying to stop the Soviet advance, which is cool. They do have a painting guide in here, like all the books. Typically, they offer 2 different kinds of paints: the NATO 3-tone camo, and then a kind of a olive yellow, which is, I think, really cool. And that would be like older things are painted in that color. I really like that color, though. I think that's a cool looking color. But again, it's going to be your older units. So the painting guide's there, which is always helpful for infantry as well as tanks. And then really the rest of the book is just advertisements for all the cool cool West German stuff that's coming out. So there you go, guys. I hope you like this short look at the new West German book. I know I'm excited for it. I'm probably not going to collect West Germans seriously, but I did order the West German starter box so that I can, at least try them out on the table, or maybe use them as an allied formation in an American or British list, or vice versa. So I think there's a lot of cool stuff that can be done. I think ultimately, I think that we're going to do a video that's the all the main battle tanks, and compare them and have kind of a face-off. But having that option, the Germans get their analog to the M1A1HC. The Leopard 2A5 is just a monster. And even if I only can play with a couple of them on the table, I want to do it. I want to check it out. I know it'd probably be horrible against some of those net lists I see with 60 T-55 tanks, but nevertheless, I think it looks cool. The West Germans give you an elite force, probably the most elite force in the game currently, particularly of the main 4 factions that you can be. Or you can play them as a 3+ horde army as well. They have, by giving you that formation with the infantry on the last line, you can really play it either way. So there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please do let us know. Leave a like and subscribe down in the comments below. We always appreciate that. Click that bell to receive notification when we release new content. If you like this or you like our Flames of War content, do check out our Patreon. Their patrons get access to a Flames of War battle report every month. As always, thanks for listening and watching, and keep on wargaming.